All right, good morning, hello, and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. I'm here with Andrew Powell, Greg, and Jason Story today. We've got a lot of things that came up, a lot of things we're talking about in the little pre-show warm-up, and a couple topics that have come up throughout the week. So welcome, hello. If you're here with us live, say hi in chat and join the discussion. Also, there's a poll for you to vote in. We got a couple votes in there right now. I'm curious to see what everybody thinks it's going to be one of our topics going forward. So good morning. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Oh, so how's everybody doing this week? Everybody have a good week? And any big news or events?
Only small event on my side.
There's this really cool asset that was released for 50% off.
Yes, that's the small event on Powell's side, the Nature Manufacturer one. Is that's what you've got behind you, right? The new modular castle and dungeon set.
Yeah, that's exactly the little small asset that we released this week. It only took us almost 3 years of work.
It's a long time.
Yeah. It is definitely cool. We've got to make that bigger. I wonder if I can let's stretch it out and make it large for just a second. So can you just tell everybody really quickly if they haven't seen, I know a lot of the people who are regulars have already seen this pack, know what it is, but can you tell everybody who's not familiar with it what it is that you built that just released?
This is its final name is Modular Castle and Dungeon. It's quite a big park. It has around 2,000 of meshes, 1,300 prefabs, insides, outsides, lava, volcano, everything that you may want to have to create such environments for fantasy RPGs or even strategies.
Nice. Yeah, I want to play with it for my MOBA experiment, like I was telling you earlier. Yeah, that looks really cool. It kind of reminds me, though, more of a raid dungeon, though. So I feel like it's one of those where I used to work on MMOs a lot, and I'd go through like the levels that people designed, and like some of them looked like you would instantly inspire you to make a big raid encounter for it, and this is definitely one of those. I could see like this being a high level, MMO or RPG level, high level dungeon area, or just with your base level that you've already built here. And this is like a modular thing, so people can build up their own levels off of it as well, right?
Not only the prefabs are modular, we also made one thing. We made as always, our custom shaders, and with shaders, which are quite new addition to our things, is that each shader, each shader has 3 options. Let me just, as always, Unity must make troubles. When I'm trying to showcase material.
Your live demo, yep.
Yeah, I think something's wrong. But let me change 1 second to different Unity window. Because this window...
What you need is your own tab for that material. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, using V-tabs.
Yes.
For example, this is another look that we made. I think it took me about an hour to change entire look of the scene, so you can have it in some different views, different looks.
Oh wow!
Everything else, and it's mostly because it works. Yeah, so we made what's interesting in this material that we split it into 3 parts. One part is base color. So we can take any texture and change it, the look for it. I think, do I have some marble? Oh, yeah. So I can change it, only the look. So this is the one thing. You just change the usages. The second thing, you can change the cover. So many of the elements, for example, like you see here, have covered shader. So you can add sand, you can add ice, snow, like in the last one. So you can change. And third thing that you can change is the shape. The shape is mostly responsible for the shape of this wall that you can see that it looks like a stone wall.
Mhm.
So you can change everything, and it's quite easily, quite fast. And we added it into this pack. I think it's the first pack that uses this technology that we developed. That's
That is
why
really cool.
one of the main things that it took us so long to create. So as
Oh,
asset storage sellers, we always want people to be able to change how they view the castle. We are planning to add several new prefabs to it, and also are planning showcasing it in different environments, like forest environments and different views of the castle, only by changing textures and the environment around it.
this thing looks really, really cool. And now I've got another idea for a game that I was kind of experimenting with before. And after seeing you run through it, I wanted to do one where you kind of fought as a dragon and defended an area. And I can see lots of spots right in there where I can just use that, and it kind of looks perfect. It's kind of exactly the look I wanted.
Here it was. Yeah, I found it.
I'm a huge fan of infinite possibilities.
Yes.
Yeah, you see it.
And the bull's going to make a farming simulator out of it. Well, it could fit. Surprisingly, when you switched it off of the lava and snow over to that, I got to say, I was kind of shocked. I knew you could do some customization. I didn't realize it was going to be that powerful.
Yeah, we did it. We also tried it with, as AI is unpopular these days, we made it that way that if you use any texture generator tool that is on like Midjourney, Unity Muse, or different ones, you can use them and change quickly how it looks. I think I made even the tutorial how to use it for Muse, as this is for Unity Asset Store. But you can use different generators too.
That is awesome. It looks really, really cool. I linked it in the chat too for everybody who wants to go check it out. It's half off for like the next couple days while it's a new asset, right?
Yeah, it's for 2 weeks.
Okay, for 2 weeks. All right, yeah. It's a good chance to go grab it.
And what's more interesting, as you can see, there's in this pack there are samples of lava in here, but in 6 days, the lava pack that goes quite nicely with this one will be also on sale on Unity Asset Store.
Oh, so and that's part of the upcoming sale, right? The new flash deals that I just found out about right before the show. So yeah, it looks like I don't. Andrew, anybody got that page up and want to share it real quick to show everybody the flash deals?
Share my screen, I think.
I can pop that up and just tell everybody. I literally just found out about these. I don't know, 20 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago. So let's
you have it? Yeah.
There we go. Sure, Andrew's got it. So there's it looks like flash deals coming back in just 4 days with I think they're 70% off. I think it's the 70, 60, 50% off drop.
That's what I believe so. Unistorm is one of my all-time favorite packages because when I first started with Unity, this pack has been around forever. It inspired the shit out of me to make anything RPG fantasy. It was weather and clouds and rain. It was amazing. So I always love seeing Unistorm. It's 70% off, I think, when they launch. And the schedule is all up here, so you can see what's what. There's Nature Manufactured. Do you know where you are in this list, Pavel?
In 6 days, so it will be.
There you go, right there. So in 6 days for them, if you search for Infinity PBR, you'll find 3 things from us in 12, 14, and 15 days. So you're gonna have to mark 4 calendars for those events.
I just check it every day. That's what I always do. I just refresh it daily and see what's new on the sale and if there's anything that I want to grab 70% off. Nice. And
there's just
go ahead.
There's a lot of stuff. Protofactor, some stuff from Protofactor. People know some new stuff that I haven't really noticed before. So, yeah.
Nice. Oh, real quick before we move off of asset stuff, I'm curious. I mentioned, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, that VTabs asset that I started using earlier this week, and I liked it so much, just made a video about it because it's saving me a ton of time. The tabs do save for somebody that asked about that, and I've just like every time I go back to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is so nice. Like I open up my project or I have it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to go find that thing. I have a tab for it right there. I was just curious if any of you have found any other really exciting or interesting assets where you're like, this is basically an auto include, it like that are new or recent. Because like I always used Odin, and there were a couple others like Text Mesh Pro before it was an asset, and Text Animator. But this VTabs one is it's not just like situational where like some projects it makes sense. It makes sense for basically any project where I've got game objects and data, where I've got prefabs or scriptable objects or anything like that. So yeah, do you guys know of anything else like that that's been recently or kind of like surprised you?
For me, I think the new foliage renderer by Jason Booth that was released on store. I don't know.
Okay.
It was a week ago, something like that. Yeah.
It's still 30% off.
Yeah.
Oh, and that discount ends tomorrow.
Yeah, for me, it's if you're doing something with nature or big terrain, open terrains, then you have to use some kind of foliage renderer rather than you use standard Unity terrain. Yeah.
And this is your Meadow pack, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This
So-
is our Meadow pack. Jason made it. I think it works with most of our assets. So yeah.
Is the general gist that after this happens, it just is much better and you can see more at once for faster rendering too?
Yeah. Yeah, it uses instantiation, and knowing Jason, he made it as fast as it's possible.
And I should probably say this is actually part of the video that's playing on the asset store. I don't have the audio up, so I'm assuming he's talking over whatever this is that's happening and that this isn't a bug. This is probably part of the process, I suppose. But-
Yeah, because I think this is before you turn on. If you are using some custom shaders, you have to if you're instantiating meshes in Unity, you have to put info into compute buffer. Yeah, the buffer for the shaders to know how to position everything and all the elements of the meshes. If you are using standard Unity shaders, then Jason, I think, had included it. But if you are using custom shaders, you have to change them or use his asset to that it will change them to be able to instantiate all assets. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the part of process from what I'm seeing and from what I checked.
There you go. And this is what I noticed is you can see the bushes way off in the distance.
Yeah.
They don't just disappear and it doesn't become the
They
nice.
don't just disappear.
It always drives me nuts. Although it happens in a lot of games.
It mostly starts working the similar way how Unreal is instantiating its meshes.
So
That
it looks
was the
beautiful.
thing that always boggles my mind when I see popping in games that are so obvious. I'm like, there's got to be a better way of doing that.
Apparently there is. Anybody got any other really exciting tools you came across?
I saw a new
That was
one.
really exciting. I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think you might have covered this before, Jason. Ultimate Editor Enhancer. Did you talk about that recently? I put a link in the.
I'm trying to think. Let me see. I've looked at and talked about a lot of assets. I don't think so. I mean, I think I played with it. It looks like, but I don't think I've done any deep dives into this one. Have you been using it?
But I've only. Yeah, I've only scratched the surface though. But there's a ton of features in it.
What are the best ones that you've come across so far?
Well, I mean, for project organization, the icons it puts on things, and you know, if you put like 2 dashes in front of in the name of a game, it highlights the whole thing and gives it a color. And it gives colors to all your folders, in your hierarchy, but it's got all kind of design tools and things for changing your pivot point. And there's probably 100 or more features for like design tools type stuff. So And it also has autosave. It autosave your project for you periodically. And I think there's a little save icon on your game object, so you can go in and make changes at runtime and click that little save icon, and it will persist those changes even though you're running.
Oh. It seems cool. Has anybody else used this? It looks like you got at least one person in chat who really likes it. No? I'll have to give it a try and see how it is. Yeah, let me know how you like it next week.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's some guys in my mastermind group that recommended it highly. This is why I grabbed it.
That's usually the way to go. You want to go from somebody else that uses it constantly recommending it. Yeah, if you still like it next week, let me know, and then I'm gonna dig in and try it out too.
And some might want to wait 16 days, but others might just want to say, do it today.
Oh, okay. Is it popping up on the upcoming flash deals?
Yeah, it's got a flash deal 16 days.
All right. It seems like a good.
I saw this one. This is a Naval battle kit, and I just thought it looked cool. Whoops, pushed the wrong button, I think. But Naval battle kit. So, folks,
are you sharing that one? I want to see it.
I think I'm sharing this one. What happened? I think I accidentally. Let me stop sharing and start sharing. Oh, start sharing. I think I went full screen and screwed it all up. Let's see.
Story, you've had way too long to think about the answer to this question now.
Honestly, other than the tabs, which I basically took from you after watching you talk about it, not really. Most of the stuff I prefer to write very small custom editor tools rather than use fully fledged things. I have used a lot of them before, and apparently I bought this one at some stage in a different sale. I just haven't gotten around to trying it yet. I mean, it looks good. I like things like specifically the bit that looks most compelling about that one is the fact that it's got arrow controls over other components, like arrowing through the number incrementers. So that's just like quality of life, which implies actual use. But yeah, on a personal level, nothing particularly comes to mind. Mostly it's just the usual, make my own little custom editor tools.
Yeah, but you did get the tabs.
I did get tabs, yeah, just because it's one of those ones where I legitimately, I think I said this to somebody else, I actually didn't know how they did that. Like, I know a bunch of the background internal APIs and things, but I was like, I don't actually know what you're hooking into to achieve that. So I wanted to just literally take a look at it under the hood. So.
Oh, okay. Did you get a chance to look at it yet?
Not yet, no. But I mean, it looks good. And honestly, it seems light enough weight that I would probably just use that one rather than make my own just for the sake of it. So.
Yeah, I was surprised. It was just a couple code files in a single folder, nice and lightweight. It seemed very, very tiny, and it just kind of worked, and it worked well.
Yeah, I previously felt the same way. There's an asset called Pretty Objects, and it's just basically the very same kind of one of those small concept ones. It just highlights hierarchy objects, but because it was so small, it was something I looked at and went, I'll just make my own version. I just wrote a few lines and did the same thing. But it was a cool idea, just the fact that rather than a whole custom inspector, just something to make your own little headered sections. So I did like that one for a while.
Yeah, I like how that VTabs one is split out, and it's just that, not all of the things that they can do combined into one. So I can just kind of pick the parts that I want. Now, Andrew, what happened to the thing you pulled up that I totally distracted away from, the battleships?
Yeah, I was watching. It was just on the new release discount. I have not used it. I just saw it yesterday, and I thought, that looks cool. I think because I had also seen just the day before, like some AAA game that's supposed to be like a quadruple A game that is all about
the pirate one.
Yeah, and so I saw that. I was like, well, that's a good timing. So just it looks cool. I'm not gonna use it. I'm not gonna buy it. I just thought it looked really neat. So
yeah, and it's on my buy list. I want to buy it and have played with this one. I also saw it. Especially it's from the developers of Universal Water System, so they have their own water system with it.
Okay.
So
that was the other thing I wasn't sure about. Like the coolest thing about that was the water. So I was like, how much of this
is their water system? Yeah.
Okay.
I checked info about them, and they have their own water system that's working.
Because the HDRP water system is supposed to be very, very good, right? I haven't used it, but
it's okay. That's I think the biggest problem I have it's not stable enough for me yet. Yeah. When it gets more stable, I will use it. I think the system in naval battles is for URP mostly. Yeah, it's not HDRP.
Okay.
So it's more that they are targeting more the mobiles rather than PCs.
That makes sense. Now I'm just showing Unistorm because I like it.
That Storm, yeah, and somebody had mentioned Aura 2 or Aura 3 preview on Twitter. I saw that earlier too. I think I might have retweeted it. It looked really cool. They got a new Storm demo where they show like a desert scene, and then they show it with the Aura wind effects and storm stuff on. It's like it turns into a giant sandstorm. Does definitely look really cool and shows it off really well. So, cool.
Is Aura 3 on the start? Because I see only 2.
I don't think so. I think it was a preview of it coming out just up on Twitter.
It's been a while since
Aura 2 is on flash deal in 8 days.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Nice. Grab it on the flash deal and get the discount on the 3 when it comes out. Sounds cool. Anyway, I think there were some other topics I wanted to talk about other than the all things. The first maybe we'll just dive into was about code stuff. And since I haven't had a chance to hear story talk for a while, I feel like it's a good one to dive into first. So I put up a poll. There's one in chat right now, and there was one in the community channel yesterday. The community channel version of it was much worse, where first, let me just read off what the poll is and make sure that everybody knows and we're on the same page. So the question was just, in a typical situation with your own projects, how many lines of code do you like your methods to be? And I capitalized typical just to really call out that obviously there are going to be some scenarios where you have to have a very long method because it's just required. So sometimes there are specific uses and scenarios where it has happened, but in the average typical scenario. And on the YouTube community poll, 63% said size didn't matter at all, which I thought was completely nuts. And there was a lot of argument on Twitter about that too, from people. And it seemed like it was mostly junior and newer developers, but I could have misread that, that were very heavily for the code length doesn't matter. We can write it as long as it needs to be for anything. And I mean, personally, I felt like they're just completely missing the point of the argument or the discussion. But I really wanted to see what everybody else thinks, because if everybody disagrees with me, maybe I'm wrong.
Everything in the update loop.
Yeah, everything in the update loop. One file.
Do it there.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. And if you haven't voted yet in the poll, go vote. It's in the YouTube chat. And if you have thoughts on it, let us know in the chat too. But who wants to jump on this first and eviscerate the 43 or 63% of people that are wrong, or tell me that I'm wrong, whichever one.
I think the answer for me is just not. It doesn't matter. It does matter, but what is your ideal? So if you're looking at the question, how many lines do you like? Like if you're looking at it and you see your code, what's a size that you look at it and you're like, oh, that looks good? Or like, where's the range where it looks too small or too big? Is there one? Better. That range gets smaller. I don't have a number, but I do remember clearly years ago when I was first on the show with you, you would mention things like, oh, if a method's ever over X number of lines, some relatively low number, you instantly refactor it. And I'm like, man, all of mine are more than that. And I gotten better. I more and more look for shorter ways of saying the same thing. So just, can I write this in one line instead of 3 or 4? I use link a lot more than I used to. And I now will purposely find a method being some number long and realize, okay, parts of this definitely can be moved out. And so either I'll do it or I'll just say, hey, AI, which parts can be moved out? Sometimes it'll do it for me. And then I just let it do it because it saves me, 3 minutes. But I don't have an exact number, but I would say if it's more than what I can see on my screen, then that's where I'm like, okay, I'm scrolling up and down.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna do a pan to your shot of your like 50-inch screen in portrait mode.
Yeah, but that would be hilarious. But realistically, I'm also just noticing like patterns where it's obvious if I'm doing this in the method, I should move that out. I should like there's just trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but just getting a value. Like I shouldn't be getting this value in this method. There should just be a method that gets me that value, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, if I'm doing a thing with 4 or 5 lines of code and I feel like I need to put a comment above it to say what those 4 or 5 lines of code is doing, I will just extract that whole block to a method and make sure the method name conveys what the comment would have done. And I do that as I'm developing. So I'll just get it to work first, and then I'll go back and clean those things up. But I'm like you, if I have to scroll, then it's already getting too long.
Yeah, on that part, Greg, where you said you extract the methods out, I think it's interesting to clarify when and when you should not do that too, which is the one scenario where I used to do that accidentally and didn't realize it was an issue is when those methods have other side effects and are changing class level like fields and things. Those times I tend to not extract them out into a method unless that method is like set this thing, and it's very obvious, but for some reason it needs to have a multiple line process to do it. But when you have those methods in there, it's good to generally not be changing state of stuff because that kind of gets abstracted. But if you're just getting things or doing stuff like that or modifying the state of things that you're returning back or passing in, it's a lot less likely that you're going to end up confused by it, when you look at it again next year. Anyway, I'm going to shut up because I want to see what everybody else says. Story.
I guess it's who you ask and when, right? If you read books on the topic, you're going to see the number 24, 25 written a lot. And the reason for that was because that old adage that Greg said about if it fits on a screen used to be because IBM terminals were roughly 24 to 25 characters in size. And so the answer was as long as you can see it. That doesn't apply anymore when you can have high density screens with infinite scroll and still kind of read it. Personally, I don't think I've ever really thought about my lines specifically in like a counting fashion. The short answer for me is I go by metrics of cognitive complexity, not literal lines, and not an arbitrary one either. Like there's literally plugins for cognitive complexity. It just gives you a floating number over functions to say this is vaguely too complicated and vaguely hard to understand. And it's not just a matter of line count. It's a matter of how many, how big is the cyclomatic complexity? How many branching narrative structures do you have inside the tree of paths you're building for your code base?
Which is like your loops and if statements and switches and method calls and stuff. So
the short answer for me is I limit those more than I care about lines of code. And a very quick way to do that would be if you have a loop with stuff inside of it. If you take the entire function and say for each thing do action, you immediately cut out that complexity. If you have nested statements and you use guard clauses, you cut out all of that complexity for stuff too. And so I would say over time, I've started to come to the conclusion that I actually care less and less about the lines argument, mostly because the biggest thing I see is people don't use guard clauses. If there's one thing I would like globally change, I would say keep your methods long if you prefer. Just stop having curly brackets wrapped 2 layers deep around your functions when a single if opposite exit at the very top would pull everything to the left and simplify your entire code base. That to me is a far bigger sin than anything to do with lines.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think that the columns is. I'm just curious, like when you're looking, I guess on the. I'd
say I average 10. I'd say if I'm being 10? Vague, I would say 10 to 12. Personally, I don't tend to. I don't abstract algorithms. I basically, if something is if something is a visible chunk of algorithm, I leave it as it is. The thing I tend to extract actually is statements. Often if statements. If I've got an if statement, does if this and this, then this and this, I like to say if should exit thing or is valid or in good state, then whatever series of conditional ifs, that's clearer for me because often in short, I don't want to be reading across this way. I want to be reading this way. So as soon as something gets too long in from a row perspective, that's when I'll cull it. So yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal for me personally. And a side note to that too, one thing kind of philosophically why I think some people say it doesn't matter is actually more to do with the fact that depending on where you come from. So you're right. Juniors have a very the pendulum swing is now back in the direction of everything is super efficient and any attempt at architecture is bad news. So there's a lot of conversation in that direction that's kind of not worth having. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are diehards into that approach. But one thing that is a fair argument, I think, is if you've worked in enterprise, a lot of companies will use style guides and automated style cop solutions on their Git repositories. And oftentimes internal metrics in businesses will use line counts for quality of work assessments for whether someone's producing work or valuing their stuff. And so I think it's a fair argument for people to say line count doesn't matter if they're coming at it from the angle of some companies literally grade you on the quality of work you do based on number of lines. And so it's a foolish metric from that perspective. So I guess it depends who you're talking to, right? If it's a code cleanliness question, is it a quality of work question? Is it a amount of work being produced? Is it whatever? So it's a tough one, and that's why, as much as I agree with you sentiment wise, I think I actually agree more with the statement of line count doesn't matter, even though that's not what it really means. I think philosophically, I think living in a mindset of not thinking about line count serves you better.
Okay, I guess I can see it. I just I don't know. For me, the line count check, it's just like a sanity check. It's should I look at it and I go, okay, once I hit 20 lines, literally, I'm like, okay, look at this. Should this be more than one thing? And I don't do it right away. Just to clarify, while I'm writing the code and I'm putting it together and figuring out how it works and what it does, I don't look at the line count at all. It's once I'm done and it works, and I'm like, okay, this works. And then I look at it and I go, okay, that thing is like 40 lines long and it's probably doing more than one thing. I can probably just clean this up just a little bit, kind of like what Greg was saying, taking chunks, extracting them into methods. That's often like just the use case. Sometimes I'll look at it and go, okay, this thing is way too long. It's probably doing multiple things that shouldn't even be done at the same time. It's probably just doing these here because I was being lazy and it should be somewhere else. Not always. And then sometimes it's 40 lines long and like you said, it's going through some algorithm and splitting it up is just going to make it more complicated and you don't need to do it. But that's not the typical situation. The typical is, I have an enemy that wants to do some damage to an NPC. If that damage method is 50 lines long, then there's some fucking complexity there if I want to go change it. If I want to make any changes to the way damage is done, it's going to get more confusing and complicated later. And I've seen it, I guess, at the extremes. When you don't care about it at all, you end up with things like I've seen where you have literally the equip method in EverQuest 1 was 10,000 lines long to put an item into a slot. So changing anything into there was obviously very likely to break stuff, right? And it wasn't like it happened instantly. It's just that it happened over time. It's big, doesn't matter. It's big, doesn't matter. It's growing. Just keep adding more and more and more. And if you don't fix those problems, they turn into giant nightmares where you got to have somebody like Jared spend 6 months just refactoring to the exact same functionality, so salary to be exactly where you were before to just pay off some technical debt. And I think that's the biggest problem you run into if you're not at least considering and thinking about the length and cleanliness of your code. And it's not that you just want to shrink down. I know there's also some comments about adding a bunch of small components and how that gets messy too, and it definitely does. Don't shrink down to just like having one component that does each little thing and is 5 lines long, because it gets even more confusing and the complexity is a lot harder to keep track of in your head if it's outside of a single code file. But
I guess it also depends on which way do you lean in terms of where you bias to. In my case, I naturally I think in interfaces. So I will design things with contract-based architecture anyway. And so my stuff tends to be small from the outset because I will say, I'm doing raycasting, therefore I need conditional. Why am I doing raycasting? Well, I'm doing selecting. So I'm doing selecting. What I'm really saying is if something is within range, act on it. And I'll write the code that says if thing available to be selected, selected. And then all the junk code that actually is the implementation details goes in there. And so when I'm at the stage, I've still only written 4 lines of code in my core function. So I don't really need to extract out further because I tend to write at the level at which I think at that stage anyway. If anything, for me, it's the way around. I often find myself in a situation where I'm like, actually, you know what? Right now, I've changed my mind. There's no further abstractions I want for this. So it makes more sense to inline it. There's no need to have a floating interface for a single implementation structure or something. So I find in my case, I tend to err the other way. I'll kind of like catch myself choosing to inline things because, as people pointed out in the chat, there's an indirection problem where if you have to think 2 or 3 steps indirectly, it can make things harder to reason about, which isn't too big of a problem in some cases, but if it's not needed, it's not needed, right? There's no real benefit to have it there either. So yeah, again, I can see arguments for both sides. I think for me at least, I can get to the same reasoning that you do, just not by thinking in lines of code. For me, it's more the same argument can be made for kind of atomicity regarding the functions themselves, as in like if something's doing one thing, it literally won't get too long. That one thing is variable. One thing doesn't mean one line of code or one function. One thing can mean solves one problem, and you can define where that line is. But it's pretty hard to have something go over 400 lines if it's doing one thing, because one thing by rights has collaborators, and collaborators have subcomponents, and then at some stage you have to look at dividing it out. And I guess it's just, again, it's experience over time versus what you value, and it's a tough question.
All right, I think we should probably move on. People are probably sick of hearing me bitch about code length. There was something else that Pal shared earlier, and I wanted to pop it up. It was in the title too, about Google's new AI game generation, which is just going to replace us all anyway. So it's a whole conversation is pointless anyway, since Google is just going to generate all the games. Did you guys take a look at this yet? I've linked it in chat right up at the top. I'll drop it into chat as well again. But it looks like they basically trained AI to build games based off of videos of games from YouTube, and it's generated. You can kind of see here a couple different things, and it's all 2D platformers, and I'm sure they're terrible and barely work, but it seems like a kind of a big step forward, or the next step forward. Replacing all programmers and developers, or at least not really, but honestly, getting it closer to that. You go say what you want, and a game is there, or the things that you want are there.
I admit, I maybe it's a cynicism or just general, like yeah, obviously all the gender stuff is really cool, but I'm looking at this going, what is the evolution here? And it's like, oh, well, you can move your character around the playable thing. It's like, okay, but back when I was in college, I learned about edge detection algorithms, where if you had a picture of things with platforms, I could trace the platforms and theoretically place colliders on those spaces, and abracadabra, it's the same thing. Like the fancy part was always a generation of the art, the ability to just place some colliders on those shapes. Like, I'm not seeing mechanics happen here. I'm not seeing it like reason out AI or complicated. I'm seeing it basically place colliders on shapes that are consistent. I'm not, again, it could be wrong. Maybe it's doing more than I'm thinking, but as it stands, to me, that just looks like the same thing that's there, plus a little bit of extra layers of collision detection.
I guess for me, the impressive part is that it's kind of dissecting what's happening in the video game. Like what part is the player that's moving around? What are the platforms and all that? And it's doing it from the video, and then kind of recreating that. I mean, I know you can kind of do it with image and edge detection stuff, but doing it as like a full-on video moving, I don't know. It seemed pretty impressive to me.
Do we know if this is like well, 2 things. On one side, if you are quote unquote playing this, is it taking in did it build a world that a build basically that you can now load up that's the same every time, or is it generating the world as you move around it, accepting the inputs as saying, hey, move the camera to the right and instantly generate more of this world, and then maybe remember what you've generated in the past, just basically outpainting as the character, quote unquote character, moves around? So that's one question. And then the other question is, it's not really, or maybe a comment, it's not really making, well, it's like a completely different thing it looks like a game, but it's not at all what we think of as a game or a program. It seems like it's entirely different, even if it looks the same, because all it did was look at videos and say, oh, well, in these videos, this is how the background parallaxes.
Yeah,
so
it's cropped out and moves an element. To me, that's why to me it seems like I've seen this done in every other form. It just happens to be video game form now. I'm not seeing an evolution here. It's the same way that when the first TAS AI stuff came along and people were talking about machine learning algorithms, one of the first examples was playing original Mario. And it was really impressive. You could have an AI literally play through the first few levels of Mario, and it was whatever. But if you place it in a different level, it would immediately fall and die. Or if you played it in a different game, it would immediately fall and die. Why? Because it's not really playing the game. It's just it's building a rule set based on what's visually in front of it. And playing, that's one thing. But generating, that's another. If it's just going to generate, it's no different than someone like procedurally placing platforms at various heights and creating nonsense. I guess again, it comes back to what you value. If the art's being generated, and the environment's being generated, and now the platform placement is being generated too. Like I'm trying to figure out where's the game in the game. To me, that's just numbers on numbers, right? There's not.
But what if it's generated, but it's generated more directed? So like the game designer is basically able to generate it, and the AI is like their programmer and their artist combined, where they're telling it what they want, where they want it, and then it's doing the heavy lifting of.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I'm not saying it won't be. Like I definitely live by the two papers down the line philosophy, right? Like I no doubt this will be impressive. I'm just saying right now.
Now it's just a neat little.
You could take DALL-E and then literally write a script yourself that says for each pixel in image, look for edge, calculate edge detection, create polygon collider, place a long thing, drop in Unity character controller, and you get this. Like there's nothing you could have done this back in the first iterations of this. Like I'm not seeing specifically what this is adding other than as Andrew was saying, it's like differentiating a unit and saying I'll move this separately. But to me that's not the part of game dev that's the hard or important part. That's like to me that's not the impressive part, you know.
I think this is essentially not it. Like this is a red herring in a way towards that future where we all use AI to help us actually build games.
Yeah, like I think it will. I just think this is again, red herring is a good choice of words. To me, it's implying something that isn't there. Whatever this is saying it is not actually happening on screen, in my opinion.
Yeah, from what I read the paper, because they also released the paper for it, it's not generating art as such. Yeah, the main thing that the genie, because it's called, it's generating the behavior of the player in the game. So if you move, it generates how the your avatar is moving, how it's reacting to the environment, and second thing is generating entire world frame by frame. So if you're moving, it's generating you constantly the new images. So it's open world to the game that you can play entirely. Yeah. So that's what they are trying to sell as the main thing now. Yeah, so it's not it's generating one image and that's it. It's generating you when the player behaves, it's thinking what should happen on the screen if player does something.
Yeah, it seems really interesting, but
so if anything,
I mean, obviously not fun to play.
That sounds more like an early NPC AI, like, or an early AI that controls the characters. I don't know the right term, maybe like micro motions that, you press jump and all you want is, I'm going to say, well, the character is going to go up 30 pixels or whatever many pixels. And then this AI will just figure out the middle part, interpolate. Okay, we know it needs to get here in this amount of time. What does it look like? Let me just make that up. And then you get a different jump every time, which sounds really cool for, if you have a cape on or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's more, they are not aiming at generating a game. They are generating what Andrew said is the look. If you scroll down, they showcase that they also, the genie. Jason, can you scroll down a little?
Yeah.
There's the robot arm at the almost the bottom of the this page. Yeah.
There it is.
So
yeah.
they are showcasing. The second thing is that the robot is taking elements and they are generating how these elements would behave. So you have the, I think it's some kind of bug that it wraps correctly to the image that they're generating it to. Yeah.
Yeah, see,
That's
that to me is
interesting.
more representative. That I think is impressive and interesting in its own right, because it is showing you exactly what it's aiming to do. It's not looking like it's trying to be a game. It's solving for which elements are interactive and demonstrating the aspects of how behavior would work and things like figuring out motion and applying that kind of physics to it. So yeah, that's cool. I appreciate this for what it's doing.
Yep, it's going to be the future tech for the holodeck soon. They gotta be able to simulate all that stuff first,
Ready
right?
Player One.
Before the holo characters can pick stuff up and throw it at you.
Yeah, for me also, I think the Sora was more something more that showcased rather than this Genie. Yeah, Genie is okay, but I think for games the Sora is more obvious step. Yeah, because if it's able to generate videos, you will be able to generate games live. But we still need lots of power to do something like that.
Well, that's why, honestly, like of all of the AI plus games things I've seen, the one that interests me the most is the post processors. There's those ones that like take a low res game and literally just render a high res game on top of it, right?
Yeah.
That to me is infinitely more interesting, because that solves a lot of problems. Like you were showing with, sorry, right now, no matter how fast you make it, in order to modify a game's graphics, you do have to change the shader or the normal map or something simple. You have to do some modification to the actual process you're doing. If you could literally make a game and have it be almost blank slate and then choose in settings whether you want it to be a forest or something else, that's really cool. That to me is a compelling value proposition.
Yeah, I mean that's why I look forward to the day. I know a lot of musicians are probably not going to be happy with this, but I look forward to the day when I can take a song from Breaking Benjamin and tell the AI, please make me an acoustic version of this without lyrics, and use a guitar and mandolin and a piano. And then it does that. Because sometimes I want to hear a good melody that I like, but I don't want Breaking Benjamin because they're loud. And, I think that for me would be a really compelling way to use this technology to make the world just slightly better and more interesting. And it doesn't technically harm anyone. I think Breaking Benjamin might want some money out of that, and maybe they should get some money out of that. But I think that's just so neat. And so being able to change Super Mario Brothers and make it a sci-fi dystopia, same game, just different look, great. This is just adding more value to the products that humans create, in my opinion. Some will disagree with me.
Well, anybody got any other thoughts on this? I wanted to talk about one other thing before we run out of time that is kind of important. Well, actually, there were two other things, but one of them was that later on today, I'm going to be interviewing Dan from Oxide, who built the nitrous engine. They've got their own custom engine for their RTS that they've done, and this is I think it's their second one. I know they've done one other one. I think this is number 2. And he's like a graphics genius, obviously way above my head. But I'm just curious, have you guys, first off, taken a look at any other engines outside of like the main ones? There's Unity and Unreal were kind of the core ones, and obviously Godot's out there now, kind of big. But have you guys looked at any of the custom engine stuff before? And can you guys think of any good, interesting questions to ask about? I mean, I've got quite a few, but is there anything that you would be curious about or you would want to ask if you were talking to somebody who's built an engine largely for performance and scale of massive numbers of things? So yeah, do you guys have anything to add to it? I've got lots of questions, but I'm always looking for more.
You just answered my first question. Would be why build a custom engine, and that you just answered it. So there you go. But that would be my first thing, because they're obviously having a custom engine comes with immense upfront costs, time and resources, then maintenance as well. versus outsourcing that. But there's trade-offs to outsourcing your maintenance and updates to Unity or Unreal as well. But that would be my first question, is why? But it sounds like there's a very specific reason why in this case.
Yes, it seems like it. And it's also an engine that they've been doing for a while. Like their first game was, I think, 8 years ago. So it may have been that at the time there were no alternative options that could come close. And maybe there are now, maybe there aren't. I don't really know. I guess I don't fully know the complete scale of their setup. But I thought it was it's going to be an interesting discussion at the very least. I've already watched a couple interviews with him, and he's got some really interesting, cool stories and lots of history. So if anybody,
I would say on the make your own engine thing. Well, first of all, the other engines I've looked at stuff is I like the look of Flax engine. I think it's really early days, but it's sort of, to me, it's visually a good middle ground between Unity and Unreal. It's like,
which one is that?
Flax.
Okay, FLAX. I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's very similar to. It's got that C# based programming mono stuff with
and it was
half Unity, half Unreal.
It was developed by one guy from Poland.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it's pretty early in terms of what it does, but what I do is I like the fact that they're kind of taking the best bits of both. But I guess more holistically, the point that I think really matters more is when we talk about making our own game engine these days, we're actually not talking about making our own game engine in the way that people think about that. Because even if you right now said, I'm going to make my own game engine, you're going to be using physics or PhysX rather. You're going to be using a graphics render pipeline from, you're going to be using DirectX, you're going to be using something. That's not to say it isn't hard to do, but even the broad strokes of why build an engine, well, because the thing you're using doesn't have what you want. That's a perfectly valid reason, or it's not performant enough, or you have a particular use case, particular hardware. But then if you are making your own engine, you're not really making your own engine from scratch. What you're doing is you're stitching together other components and building something lower level than an engine with extra features. Very few people are starting literally drawing or writing every single aspect from the, storage right up to the graphics pipeline, right? And honestly, so I guess more holistically, I get the whole don't bother make your own engine. It's a bit of a waste of energy. But honestly, if you have familiarities with graphics pipelines a little bit, if you've done some of that stuff, it's actually not that hard to grab a physics engine, grab a render pipeline, run a calculation, get the pixel and draw your shapes on screen, right? The actual portion of the basics is fine. The time consuming part of drawing your own engine or creating your own engine is really all of the nonsense that comes with user experience. It's building the windows and the components and the dragging stuff around and then managing the compounding factors of making a complex system that can support editor tooling and all that stuff. So if you're building an engine that's really just you basically saying, I don't need all this stuff and I just want to basically write code that directly does what I need, I can see a valid reason for it. I just don't think I ever would, because I think, again, the way things are going, and I also broadly, I think that's the least interesting part of game dev. I think if there are lots of great ways to be a graphic designer and graphic programmer and whatever, but the most interesting part of game dev is the game dev. And if you're wasting your time writing engines, you're not solving real player-facing problems like gameplay and user experience and what makes a game good. You could make the world's best engine, but if you can't make a good game in it, then you didn't really make a good game engine, right? You just made code that does stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's very fair. I feel like the gameplay stuff has always been the most exciting too. But I also just get when I get into the graphics code, I get over my head. It is not for me. The 3D math just blows my mind away all the time. So Andrew was asking. No, the interview we're gonna do just recorded. We're not gonna live stream it. Although I am going to ask him when we interview if he'd be up for hopping on one of the live calls maybe next week or something. I think it would be fun. But yeah, I didn't. I told when we were setting it up, we just set it up as a pre-recorded one. That actually helps too, Story, with the questions or the stuff that you're talking about, because I think that editor tooling is a big one, and I'm really curious how they went about that, because I know he's got ridiculous amount of experience in the rendering side starting in early DirectX days, and I'm just curious what that how the usability has come about, what they've done. Did they build a bunch of those, or is it all external tools, or what is that?
Yeah, because I've seen this done a million different ways, right? Like one of them, for example, is there's the Cherno building the Hazel engine, and that's a C++ engine from scratch. You can just watch him make every video, every hour, watching the whole process. He stopped posting videos as often now, but like a lot of work went into it, and you can literally watch from empty screen rendering up to drag and drop window placement and whatever. That's one. But then 15 years ago or 10 years ago, there was the Avalonia engine or Avalon engine, and that one was basically a render window inside of a standard C# WinForms or WPF application. And for them, the answer was, let's not build our own tools. Let's use one of the off-the-shelf component packs like Component One, or I think they were using one beginning with K. I can't remember whatever it was, but they had like the classic, the Windows bar and the drag and drop and the tooling dockable windows, and they got all of that off the shelf, and they basically had a glorified window frame. And then even earlier than that, when I was in college, we would just build basic applications in again WinForms, and you'd use a render frame, and you'd render X and A into the render frame on that, and you would then have access to all of your component tooling for standard component drag and drop. So you can do it each way, but most people from scratch, if they're drawing a graphics library and they're using their own graphics library, they usually leverage their own graphics library to draw the actual tools itself. It's often faster that way and lightweight and whatever. So yeah, there's like, you can go a million different ways with it. It's kind of interesting. I just think it's kind of, again, it's a lot of energy for a lot of stuff that none of it directly applies to the game dev portion.
Yeah, totally agree in most cases. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they've got here, because I know that they built it for a reason. They're trying to do something that they couldn't do with the existing ones. But I wonder again if that's still the case now with Unreal 5 and dots and all of the the last decade of advancement in game tech.
Well, that's another thing too. I don't want to derail too much, but I do think one philosophically interesting conversation to be had is there's an intrinsic difference between an engine made to make games and a game engine, in terms of something that has made a game and then has been retrofitted to become an engine. And you can see it in terms of how it develops and what features are added. Something that is developed as a game engine is what would people possibly like? It's like buying a shop and just placing products and going, I guess people might like these things, versus people going past the location and going, they're often thirsty when they pass here, let's put drinks here, which solves a problem. And you evolve to solve problems. And that's why broadly a lot of people say that Unreal is battle tested from the ground up, because it was game engine built. And Unity, while originally was built to be a game, no commercial game was released to make it, and therefore over time it has become more of a add features conversation. So I think that's probably one of the most interesting discussions around game engines now. If you're building a game engine, are you building it to be a product people consume, or are you building it because you're making something and you have to add features that literally you can't find elsewhere? That's a good value proposition, because you're actually filling a gap that doesn't exist. If you're making an engine to make an engine, I would question who you're selling it to, not just like physically, but like conceptually. Who's your target audience for someone who consumes your code to do your engine work?
Yeah, I think for most people, it only makes sense if you're making it for yourself and you've tried the other things and they're not working. They're not viable options. I think anybody building an engine ideally has already tried and experimented with all of the alternatives and made that decision beforehand. Or made that decision after. Not always though.
Yeah, because it's also like you don't have to do all of it from scratch either. Like a good example of this, I was talking to Tiago Klafka. He's a graphic artist, and he's got shaders that he liked in Unreal, and he moved a project over to Unity, and he took the shader code because it's HSS shader code, right? He can just pull it over. So even the idea of engine from scratch, again, that's why I think it's a bit of a misnomer. Like a lot of this stuff is, if you know how to use graphics pipelines, you can use graphic pipelines. If you know how to do shader stuff, you can do shader stuff. You could do it in engine, you could do it yourself, but like a lot of it comes down to picking and choosing components you need. And I go back to even 2D in the early days, you'd be using like box 2D libraries and things where you're not, it's all the engines are using this anyway. Like again, Unity doesn't even do its own audio. It's using Fmod. Fmod may be a third-party product, but Unity is using an old version of Fmod for that. So you're always on shoulders of giants, right? And I think a lot of people, you could put your energy into portions of it. We talked about water earlier. Getting good water is complicated. Like there's so many layers to getting just good and all aspects of what we talked about this before. But like if you're solving that, unless you're building a game engine designed for water-based games, all of that energy could just be spent on pick an engine that renders, and then you could still put all that energy into custom shaders and custom, cycles for doing your rendering for the different calculations for your water. It doesn't have to be a full engine. Could be, but again, it's like, where's the line? A lot of the custom engine stuff can be done in other engines. It's more of a argument of you might not have to,
Yeah. I think that probably 90 to 99% of people that are building their own custom engines are doing it because they're interested in having fun and kind of like want to learn, and they're building a game, but the game is less important to them than the process of going through it. I feel like it's only a small percent that are building it because they've got a problem that they want to solve that the other engines don't solve, or there's a reason that they can't go with those. I know it happens on occasion. There's definitely been some scenarios where games are built without.
It is worth doing though. Like, from scratch.
Hell, look at Minecraft. That's a giant multi-billion-dollar example built without a game engine, and it wouldn't have made sense to use a game engine. Millions of examples like that, though, I think, that are out there.
Yeah, and people have made game engines in game engines.
Hundreds.
Again, people have made their own, global illumination graphics pipeline render stuff in Unity and stuff. And like anything that can render anything, you can do technically anything with, right? As weird as it sounds. So you can, like, you can find tons of guides online how to start with the terminal and how to make the terminal start to draw shapes and then make the shapes. It's very bad for performance. It's not good for that, but you could literally draw 3D in the terminal if you know how. I mean, there's people who use Excel and can make Excel render things that are basically a full game if you really want to. So anything that can render can render. So it really is. It's worth learning because it teaches you the basics of. The dumbest one I ever thought for myself was a WinForms application where I built Pong. Again, really dumb. It's not meant for that. But like the fact that you can do that and go, what is a physics engine? It's just calculations. I can do it in anything that can calculate. I can do a physics engine. And then you just sort of build the layers up. What's rendering? It's anything that I can draw on a screen, whether I'm drawing a rectangle or drawing a input box. And so a game engine broadly is just the series of steps between rendering and calculations and update loops. And you can do it in anything. And so I do think it's worth learning how to do. I just, again, unless you're like already a graphics engine developer and you're pivoting to something else, it still just seems insane to me as a value proposition.
Oh yeah. No, if I didn't have the experience to do it, which I don't, the graphics side, I wouldn't do it either. But it seems like Dan does. So that would probably explain why they went that route. So that'll be a fun conversation. Anyway, if you're watching and you want to see the whole interview with Dan, just make sure you're subscribed. We'll do it. It'll probably come up later on this weekend. So, okay, let's see. There was one other topic I wanted to talk about. I don't remember what it was, though. Let me see if I can pull it up and find out. What was I thinking? Did you guys have any other topics this week that I missed?
No. I said all I was doing was the database stuff. Really, nothing fancy.
Oh yeah, that does sound interesting. We're gonna have to talk about that.
I'll be streaming later in Unity again.
Let's get that shared right now. So I'll drop a link right here. When are you going to be? What are you streaming today?
3 p.m. Pacific time. That's about 5 hours from now. I will be working on my projectile system again. I got OBS working again. So the last time I tried to stream, it had OBS stopped working. So it's working again now. So OBS will be working. And my goal today is going to be to break through the current friction that I'm facing in the projectile system to move on and get back to refactoring it and make it better. Because it feels like it's close to being ready to polish and then make documentation for and all that, but I just have to just push through this one part that's been frustrating me. So that's what I'm gonna do.
I was actually going to hit you up because I was thinking about I was playing around with that 8-player MOBA idea, and I was thinking I should try dropping in your mini map, the North Star navigation setup, because I was like, I need a mini map where I can just click and have it snap over to the different spots on the map and then show characters. And I could create that, but I don't really want to. So if you already have one that works like that, maybe we can do a quick integration and pop that in. It might be fun. Yeah. So I will. I'll have to import it into my project and try it out and see, and maybe we can just hop on and do that. It looks like a couple people will be joining your stream too. Nice. And then what What is it? The other things I want to talk about. First off, I have to reply to Jim's comment here about an AI avatar. Says, what did he say? He said, it's as usual, a wonderful show. I hope when you die, your AI avatar continues it forever. Yeah, I was telling my kid yesterday that when I die, I'll probably just get transformed into an AI if I can't just get a robotic body to put my brain into. So that's my plan. I don't want to just have an avatar. I'd rather just kind of like stay around as a robot or something. That's my plan. And we're gonna have to. I don't know enough about this to talk about it yet, but we have to talk sometime maybe next week about the Unity China stuff. I saw lots of people talking about how it's got nanite and lumen equivalents. I don't know if that's actually true though, because all I've seen was a little picture that showed rendering data, and people may have just made assumptions, but I don't actually know. So I wanted to dig in and see what I can find out about that. I don't know if you guys.
I will say though, just broadly on that, my main takeaway is: do you think when they have something that is a competitor to their biggest competitor, or at least equal, they're not going to try and sell it to you? Like obviously, as soon as it's something they want to sell you and they think they can, they probably will. But so I do think it's there, and I do think there is stuff that's better. And goes back to the dog fooding thing earlier. I do think that there's games that need that stuff that are not here, that are huge user bases of things that are solving different problems than the average Unity user. But I do think by the time they feel like they could possibly sell it, they'll find a way to package it and put it into something that they could put into a different engine, into
like Unity 6 or 7.
Yeah. Might be a while.
I have one. I'm worried about one thing. China copyright laws are quite different than European and United States. Yeah, I think they are can be a problem with it. Yeah, especially that Unity has separate company that's working for them and creating this version of engine. It's totally different.
Yeah, that's fair. It might actually be Unity's code to give, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, so it may be more problematic at it, because I'm following it, I think, about a year now, what they're developing and they're doing, and it looks really nice. I would love it to be in the main engine, but I don't see any info that it will be. Yeah,
I'll have to see what we can find out at GDC. Maybe some info.
I think honestly, you could very well be probably right on that. I guess my point is more, if Unity are not hiding it from you by choice, I'll put it that way. But broadly, if they can sell it to you, they will, I guess, is what I was more getting at. Is the idea that people are saying that there's like a secret better version that they only give to the cool kids. It's like, if they could sell you better toys, they would do it. So I wouldn't worry if that's the argument.
Yeah. I could totally see it. I've seen a bunch of speculation on Twitter, but I think we could probably have a bigger conversation about it next week too, once we all have a little bit more info. I want to kind of reach out and see if I can get any info from the people that I know at Unity too, that beyond that. And I honestly, I haven't spent more than 10 minutes looking into it, so I really need to spend some time seeing what's going on there. But I think you're both probably right, though. It's probably something that they would like to push out, and there probably is some weird copyrighty stuff or some other different rules for the Chinese version that may not apply to the US one or the global. I don't know. We'll find out more and see, but it is interesting. It would certainly be nice if Unity gets nanite or lumen or combination of the two, similar type of tech where you can stop worrying about LODs as much. I mean, I'm sure there's still some worry, but
it would help.
Yeah, it definitely help. Anyway, and then the last thing I wanted to just talk about was GDC. So I did figure out I'll be there from Monday through Thursday. I think Andrew is going to be there, right?
Yes, I will be at GDC.
Andrew will be there, and that's about it. But if anybody else is there, send me a message, hit me up. I'd love to get together and just chat for a little while or meet up or something while we're there. I think that's it for this week. You guys have any other topics, any other things you want to talk about?
I had a question, but I can wait till next time.
Okay. Is it a big one?
Kind of. It's more of an opinion kind of question.
Do you want to ask it now? Now we're all just going to wonder.
Yeah, all right. So I've had two viewers of my channel request that I do a tutorial on how to make a 2D game that looks 3D, like old 80s style game, like a pole position racing game or a Wing Commander space combat game. And my gut reaction is, why would I want to make a 2D game and try and make it look 3D as opposed to just making a 3D game and then maybe using low poly, low res graphics to make it kind of look retro? So I'm just wondering what y'all's opinion of that sort of thing is.
I can't think of a good reason other than you're like a sadist or you really have some obsession with that art style.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
other
it
way
just
around
seems-
seems way more valid to me because obviously there's many cases for games where you want 3D for the speed of production of models versus all the art sprites, but then make it look 2D. I will say though, one thing that I did see a really good argument for, and I do miss, is there was like the early PlayStation era games where you had that the kind of painted backgrounds, and then you had games on top of it. That's kind of interesting. I do miss that. I do miss the kind of older style, really high fidelity painted backdrops with kind of the 2D characters or the 3D characters walking around on the painted backdrops. The the Final Fantasies used to do that and stuff. I just more aesthetically. I don't know if there's a good valid reason for it, but I do think there's something to be said for worlds that are ungodly detailed, even if you can't interact with them, just because they make the world more interesting.
I think it's about the graphic style. I think similar style, the bolt gun, Warhammer 40,000 bolt gun had the similar style. So some parts are 3D and the enemies are 2D planes that are rotating towards you. And I see lots of games nowadays with similar style that you have 2D sprites in 3D environment that just look. It's quite many games, mostly boomer shooters. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even those, like I remember seeing a graphics pipeline for some game engine 4 or 5 years ago, where it was all 3D, but they would literally like flatten and the perspective on all of the 3D interactive elements to make them 2D. But I definitely see value in it artistically. I just don't. It just feels like there's so many more ways. There's more ways to take 3D and make them look 2D if you need them to be than they do the other way around. It just seems like a lot of extra stress.
Yeah, and I have, this is a side gig for me, and for me to devote that kind of effort for something that probably isn't a lot of demand for.
No, there's probably a dozen people that want to do that.
No, I think for a game like this, like Bolt Gun or similar games where you have 2D graphics combined with 3D art, there's quite a demand. I saw several games even.
There's probably a demand for the games, just not for people that want to know how to do the graphics for the games on the video.
But even if I was to try something like this, my reasoning would be just make the 3D models, render them out as sprites and images, and then just, you know what I mean? Like my answer would still be go 3D and then spritify what you need. The idea of like trying to solve it a different way seems, again, I'm not an artist, so I could be entirely off base. I'm just going by instinctively from cost benefit.
No, you do 2D art and you add to them 3D lighting. Mostly that's the way that you are doing it, because you have I didn't see a shader that would be able to simulate all the aspects of, for example, pixel art graphics that you do by hand. Yeah. A good pixel artist, if he does a good job, it's not possible for you to replicate it in any way with 3D art.
Oh no, but again, sorry, to be clear, what I meant was, if I wanted a 3D looking pixel art game and I had artists, I would render 3D models to do what I need to and make the motions. I would save out the frames. I would do paint overs on those with pixel art if I needed to, import those frames in, and I would have what I would need to have fully hand-painted textures, but I would retain all of the 3D reference imagery from the 3D geometry in the virtual environment. That's what I mean. Like I would make if it's trying to look 3D, but is 2D, I would literally make the 3D and then do paint overs and then replace.
So you would create your sprite sheets from 3D models. From captures from 3D models. Okay. Well, what you said, Powell, about taking 2D art and adding lighting.
If you can showcase the video that I gave you, this is also. I think this 2 or 3%. I don't know if you know that. Yes, guys, it was game, and now can you show it?
Yeah, I'm trying. Notice it's frozen up for me. 1 second.
It looks like an upscale Doom.
No, not this one. This
No,
one.
it's another link that he sent. I'm just trying to get it to switch. There we go.
Yeah, and if you look at this game, it's the first. This is second part. The first game was totally 2D, and this one is 2D in 3D. Yeah, so this is 2D pixel art in 3D environment with 3D lighting, normal maps, etc. It's lots of things to do.
You know, Sasquatch just did a video on how to add lighting to 2D scenes like that using normal maps and rim lighting and stuff. It's really good.
I'm mostly you have to do normal maps and similar things that you do in 3D to have something like that. Yeah, it's amazing thing and it's very interesting, and it's if you could showcase how to add 3D lighting to 2D games, then that's something that I think people would want to see in tutorial. Because it's not as easy as you think.
No, I don't. Yeah, I know that. That's why I'm reluctant to take it on.
I assume if it was easy, you would have just made the tutorial.
In fact, to be fair too, like the brutal honest truth is, if I was in a scenario where I was trying to solve something like this, there are some really talented tech artists I've met who are like, you literally just point them at the problem and go, you know, they know what they're doing in their domain. I wouldn't even attempt to approach something like this myself, because it comes down to not just that there's different ways to do it, but you want to be efficient with your time and effort. And a lot of people, if you're not familiar with doing certain art styles or certain approaches, you can often kind of work yourself into a corner where you have so much extra work. We talked before about ideas of small problems that lead to big complexities, like using ramps versus stairs and all the various different little things that crop up. If you're trying to do an art pipeline and you don't do art pipelines, I can see yourself getting into headaches where one small decision will 10x the amount of work you have to do. So yeah, very much when it comes to art pipeline stuff, I would 100% defer to someone who does it properly. It just, yeah.
Oh yeah. That's what your tech artist is there for. By the way, I really don't like this new pop-up thing. I tried to show the all-star sale that they got, which this is actually just a link to the free assets. If you go grab them, it's 5 free assets this week. They usually do the 1, but for the all-star week, they're doing 5, and it's like $200 worth of pretty cool characters and like 1 environment. So there's the link right there. You can go check it out and just grab. You just have to put in that code. I think it's All-Stars 2024, or I think somebody was putting in there. It said 2023 on one page somewhere, and people were getting all confused. Let's see. Oh, what's this other link you sent, pal?
Yeah, for anyone who would like to do something like that and would like to know, there's a great talk from creators of Dungeon of the Endless. It's from 2014, but all the aspects, how to do it, how to work on it, is, I think, in the middle of the movie. They're focusing on 2D rendering because they're showcasing 2 things. One is 2D rendering with 3D lighting. And second thing is how they did the procedural generation of the levels.
Nice. So I just linked that in chat too, so everybody can go check that out and go watch it. Let's see. Let's get back to a normal view. All right. Did they have game engines in 2014? Yes, they did.
I was going to say, and for the example of what I was trying to describe poorly is that's what Dead Cells did. They basically used 3D models to generate their character poses and shapes. Then they would basically generate, and then they could do their 3D. They had effects, shader effects, to make it look 2D for the stuff they were doing, to cut down on the amount of extra work. And they have videos as well. You can watch full pipelines on how they built all the steps for that. And it was very automated. Like they had a lot of very clever tools for that. And yeah, that was a fun approach.
Makes sense. It's an interesting way to go, but not the art style that I personally like. So I struggle to get too excited about it. Anyway, I guess we'll wrap it up for this week. We'll be back next week. If you're still here, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. Check out the links in the description. Go grab those free publisher assets that are up. Oh, something's alarming me. Oh, that upcoming recording. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the alert, and get ready for that interview that's going to come up. And obviously check out that all-star sale. Go check out the new castle environment, which I thought I had a link for, but apparently it has disappeared. But if you go to the Nature Manufacture page right here, you'll see that's the first thing there. It's the castle and dungeon modular pack. super cool. I plan on doing a video about it. I was hoping to do it today, but it'll probably be early next week or this weekend. Speaking of early next week, Monday morning, we have our next call for the multiplayer mastery course. And then this weekend or early next week, we'll be getting into the advanced NPC AI stuff, where NPCs and AI and characters are all kind of the same. You can take them over and have them do all kinds of interesting stuff. You can see a kind of a preview of it with the way I set up the MOBA that I may end up turning into a game. I don't know. I'm still 50-50 on it, but it's to say I'm like 55-45 on it now. So I'm leaning towards it now, which is abnormal because it's actually fun, it's interesting, and I can see a long vision for it, which I usually can't for most of the games that I start experimenting with. Anyway, anybody have any other final words before we go? Other than check out Andrew's stream. It's also linked in the chat and the description. All right. Well, we'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.